My name is Sarah Matthews, and I'm 29 years old. My husband David and I had been trying to conceive for over a year when we finally got the news that would change our lives forever and tear my family apart in ways I never imagined possible. It was a warm September evening in our suburban Atlanta home. The autumn air carried hints of barbecue smoke from our neighbors' backyards, and the dogwood trees in our front yard were just beginning to turn their brilliant fall colors. David and I had invited both our families over for what we told them was just a casual Sunday dinner. In reality, we were bursting with news we'd been holding on to for 12 weeks. My younger sister Madison was the last to arrive, as usual. At 21, she still lived with our parents in their sprawling colonial home in Buckhead, about 20 minutes from our more modest ranch-style house in Decatur. Madison swept in wearing designer jeans and a silk blouse that probably cost more than my entire outfit, her honey blonde hair perfectly styled in waves that looked effortless, but I knew took her hours to achieve. "Sorry I'm late," she announced, not sounding sorry at all. Traffic on 285 was absolutely insane. She air-kissed our mother, Patricia, and grabbed a glass of the Pinot Grigio David had set out on the kitchen island. Our dining room was packed with family. My parents, David's parents, Robert and Linda, who'd driven down from their farm in North Georgia, my older brother James and his wife Nicole, and even our grandmother Eleanor, who rarely left her assisted living facility in Marietta. The table was set with our wedding china, and I'd made my mother's famous peach cobbler for dessert, knowing it would put everyone in a good mood. As we finished our meal of herb-roasted chicken and seasonal vegetables from the local farmer's market, David caught my eye and squeezed my hand under the table. This was it. "We actually have something we wanted to share with everyone," I began, my voice trembling slightly with excitement. David stood up and moved behind my chair, placing his hands on my shoulders. "After a lot of hoping and praying," David continued, "we're thrilled to announce that Sarah is pregnant. We're having a baby." The room erupted in a cacophony of joy. My mother burst into tears, immediately rushing to embrace me. David's parents were high-fiving across the table. James was already calculating his uncle duties out loud, while Nicole was asking about due dates and baby shower plans. But through all the celebration, I noticed Madison hadn't moved. She sat frozen in her chair, her wine glass suspended halfway to her lips, her face draining of all color. Then, with a movement so sudden it made everyone jump, she slammed her crystal wine glass onto our granite countertop with such force that it shattered, sending shards flying across the kitchen. "How dare you!" she screamed, her voice reaching a pitch I'd never heard before. Red wine splattered across the white subway tile backsplash like a crime scene. "You know I've been planning to have the first grandchild. I've been telling everyone for years." The room fell silent. Even baby Nicole, James's 6-month-old daughter who they'd brought in her carrier, stopped gurgling at her toys. "Madison, honey." Our mother Patricia tried to interject, moving toward her younger daughter with her hands outstretched. "You're only 21. You're not even in a relationship right now. There's plenty of time." "No!" Madison cut her off, standing so abruptly her chair toppled backward. "I don't care about biology or relationships or any of that nonsense. I deserve to go first. I'm supposed to have the first Matthews grandchild. It's been my plan since I was 15. David's mother, Linda, always the voice of reason with her background as a family counselor, tried a different approach. "Madison, dear, babies aren't about going first or following plans. They come when they're meant to." "Shut up!" Madison wheeled on her, and I saw Linda physically recoil at the venom in my sister's voice. "This isn't your family. You don't understand our dynamics." Our father, Richard, finally stood up, his face flushed with embarrassment and anger. "Madison Elizabeth Matthews, you will not speak to our guest that way. Apologize immediately." But Madison was beyond reasoning. She grabbed her Prada purse from the counter, knocking over the remainder of the wine bottle in the process. The dark liquid spread across the white quartz like blood. "Sarah," she said, turning to face me with eyes that looked almost black with rage, "you have 1 week to fix this." "Fix What? I asked, genuinely confused and starting to feel the first tendrils of fear creeping up my spine. Get rid of it, she stated flatly. Terminate the pregnancy. You can try again after I've had my baby. I'll even help you pick a good clinic. But this baby cannot happen, not before mine. The room exploded in outrage. James jumped to his feet, putting himself between Madison and me. Are you out of your mind? You can't demand someone abort their wanted child because of some delusional birth order fantasy. It's not delusional, Madison shrieked. I've been planning this my whole life. I picked out names when I was 12. I have a Pinterest board with 5,000 pins. I've been taking prenatal vitamins for 3 years to prepare my body. This was supposed to be my moment. Madison, I said quietly, my hands instinctively moving to protect my still flat stomach. I'm not terminating my pregnancy. This is my child, David's and mine. Your timeline has nothing to do with our family planning. She stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in her eyes, something that made my blood run cold. Then you're going to regret this, she said, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. I'll make sure of it. You have 1 week to come to your senses, or I'm calling the authorities. And telling them what? David demanded, moving protectively in front of me. That your sister is pregnant. That's not illegal, Madison. She smiled then, a twisted thing that didn't reach her eyes. I'll figure something out. I always do. She looked around the room at our stunned family members. And anyone who supports this betrayal is dead to me. With that, she stormed out, slamming our front door so hard that the framed wedding photos on the entrance wall rattled. We heard her Mercedes peel out of our driveway, leaving rubber marks on the pavement that would take David weeks to power wash away. The silence that followed was deafening. Finally, Eleanor, our 82-year-old grandmother, broke it. Well, she said, setting down her coffee cup with a delicate clink, I've seen a lot in my years, but that level of crazy is new even to me. Monday morning arrived with a series of aggressive knocks on our front door at 6:47 a.m. David was in the shower, and I was still in my pajamas, dealing with my first real bout of morning sickness. Through the peephole, I could see Madison standing on our porch, dressed in a power suit like she was heading to a business meeting, instead of harassing her pregnant sister at dawn. She was holding a manila folder and had a determined expression that reminded me uncomfortably of when she was 5, and decided she absolutely had to have the bigger bedroom, camping outside my door for 3 days until our parents gave in just to get some peace. I opened the door with the chain still on. Madison, it's not even 7 in the morning. What are you doing here? I'm here to help you, she said, trying to push the folder through the gap. I've made appointments at 3 different clinics. The earliest is this Thursday at 9 a.m. It's the best reviewed one in the metro Atlanta area. They have a 4.8-star rating on Google. Madison, I told you. The second option is Friday at 2 p.m., but that one's in Marietta, so there's more traffic to consider. The third is next Monday, which is cutting it close to my deadline, but they offer sedation options if you're nervous about the procedure. By this point, David had emerged from our bedroom, still dripping from his interrupted shower, a towel wrapped around his waist. What the hell is going on? Madison held up the folder like it was a peace offering. I'm being helpful. I even researched recovery times and booked Sarah a spa day for afterwards at that place in Buckhead she likes. My treat. David grabbed the folder through the gap and immediately tore it in half, then quarters, then eighths. The pieces fluttered to our welcome mat like confetti at the world's worst party. Madison, get off our property before I call the police. But I'm trying to fix this, she wailed, and I noticed our elderly neighbour, Mrs. Chen, had come out to get her newspaper and was watching the scene with undisguised interest. Why won't you let me fix this? There's nothing to fix, I said, trying to keep my voice down. Madison, please, just go home. We can talk about this when you've calmed down. I am calm, she screamed, which rather defeated her point. You're the ones being unreasonable. All I'm asking for is a simple delay. You can get pregnant again in like 6 months. That's not how this works, David said through gritted teeth. "That's not how any of this works. Leave, now." Madison's face crumpled, and for a moment I saw my baby sister again. The little girl who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms, who begged me to French braid her hair before school, who cried for 3 days when I left for college. Then her expression hardened again. "Fine, but this isn't over. I'm calling a family meeting, a real one, with everyone, even Dad's siblings, even Mum's cousin Sharon from Texas. Everyone needs to understand what you're doing to me." She click-clacked back to her car in her designer heels, pausing only to wave cheerfully at Mrs. Chen as if she hadn't just demanded I abort my child on my own doorstep at sunrise. David closed the door and pulled me into his arms. "We're changing the locks today," he murmured into my hair. "And maybe getting a security system." I laughed, thinking he was overreacting. At that point, I still believed this would blow over, that Madison would come to her senses once the shock wore off. I'd dealt with her tantrums my whole life. The time she cut up my prom dress because hers wasn't as pretty, the semester she tried to transfer to my college and register for all my classes, the way she'd shown up in a white dress to my wedding, claiming she didn't know it was inappropriate. This was just Madison being Madison, I told myself. She'd throw her fit, Mum would talk sense into her, and by Thanksgiving we'd be laughing about it over turkey and cranberry sauce. I was so wrong. The following Sunday, we received a formal invitation via email. Not a casual text or phone call, but an actual electronic invitation complete with RSVP buttons and a somber black and grey colour scheme that looked more appropriate for a funeral than a family gathering. Mandatory family meeting, the Matthews family crisis. Sunday, September 15th, 2:30 p.m. Location, Patricia and Richard Matthews. Residence attendance required. The invitation list included not just our immediate family, but extended relatives I hadn't seen in years. Both sets of grandparents, aunts and uncles from 3 states, cousins who'd graduated college before Madison was even born. She'd even tracked down our father's estranged half-sister Deborah, who lived in Seattle and hadn't spoken to anyone in the family since a dispute over my grandfather's will in 2015. David wanted to skip it entirely, but I felt obligated. These were my relatives, after all, and maybe if Madison saw that no reasonable person would support her delusions, she'd finally let this go. We arrived to find cars lining both sides of my parents' tree-lined street. Madison had apparently told everyone it was a matter of life and death to ensure maximum attendance. Through the bay windows, I could see the living room was packed with relatives perched on every available surface, couches, ottomans, dining chairs dragged in from the other room. Madison stood at the fireplace like she was about to deliver a State of the Union address. She'd set up an actual presentation screen and had a laptop connected to a projector. My stomach dropped. "Thank you all for coming," she began, as David and I found spots near the back. "I know some of you travelled far to be here, and I appreciate you understanding the gravity of this situation." She clicked a button, and a PowerPoint slide appeared. The title read, "Why Sarah's Pregnancy is a Betrayal, a Comprehensive Analysis," in 48-point font. I heard David mutter, "You've got to be kidding me," under his breath. Madison had prepared a 47-slide presentation, 47 slides, complete with graphs, timelines, and what appeared to be screenshots from a dream journal she'd kept since middle school. Slide 3 showed a timeline titled Madison's Life Plan, with milestones marked for every year from birth to 40. First grandchild, age 22, was highlighted in pink with animated stars around it. Slide 8 contained bar graphs comparing her readiness scores to mine across categories like emotional maturity, financial stability, and grandmother bonding time. She'd somehow scored herself higher in every category despite being unemployed and living at home. Slide 15 was just a photo of me at my college graduation with a red X over my face. By slide 23, which featured a pie chart of family resources that should go to Madison's baby first, people were shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Our cousin Jeffrey, who was a lawyer, was typing furiously on his phone, probably documenting everything for his own entertainment or future legal reference. Slide 31 showed ultrasound images she'd apparently found on Google, labeled what Madison's baby would look like right now if Sarah hadn't stolen her timeline. The final slide was just the word choose in blood-red letters on a black background. The room sat in stunned silence for a full 30 seconds after she finished. Then our grandmother Eleanor slowly stood up, leaning on her walker. "Madison, sweetheart," she began, her voice gentle but firm. "I've lived through the Depression, a world war, the civil rights movement, and 8 decades of family drama. But this is the most unhinged nonsense I've ever witnessed. You need help, dear. Professional help." Madison's face went scarlet. "I'm not crazy. I'm just asking for basic fairness. Sarah always gets everything first. She was born first, went to school first, got married first. This was supposed to be mine. That's literally how age works," our cousin Amanda said slowly, like she was explaining something to a toddler. "Older siblings do things first because they're older." "But I called dibs." Madison actually stamped her foot. "When I was 15, I specifically said at Christmas dinner that I wanted to give Mum and Dad their first grandchild. Everyone heard me." "You were a child," our Uncle Marcus interjected. "Children say all sorts of things. My son said he wanted to be a dinosaur. We didn't hold him to it." The meeting devolved from there. Madison grew increasingly hysterical, at one point actually throwing herself on the ground and pounding her fists on the carpet like a toddler having a meltdown in a grocery store. She accused me of deliberately getting pregnant to hurt her, claimed David had somehow tricked me into it as part of a conspiracy against her, and threatened to contest any inheritance if our grandparents didn't intervene on her behalf. Finally, our father Richard stood up. "Enough," he said in a voice I'd rarely heard him use. "Madison, you're embarrassing yourself and this family. Sarah and David are having a baby. That's a blessing, not a betrayal. If you can't be happy for them, then you need to at least be quiet about it." Madison pulled herself off the floor, mascara streaming down her face in black rivers. She pointed at me with a shaking finger. "You have 48 hours to reconsider. After that, I'm done playing nice." "There's nothing to reconsider," I said as calmly as I could manage. "I'm keeping my baby. End of discussion." She looked around the room at our assembled relatives, most of whom were avoiding eye contact. "Fine, then you're all dead to me. Every single one of you who's taking her side. Dead. I'll never speak to any of you again." Our cousin Jeffrey actually laughed at that. "Promise," he called out, which earned him a throw pillow to the face as Madison stormed past. She paused at the doorway for one final dramatic proclamation. "And when my baby is born first, because it will be born first, one way or another, none of you will be allowed to meet them. You've chosen your side." The front door slammed so hard that a family portrait fell off the wall. After a moment of silence, our Uncle Pete raised his beer. "Well, who wants to toast the baby who's actually real?" The tension broke, and suddenly everyone was surrounding David and me, offering genuine congratulations and pregnancy advice. But even as I accepted hugs and well wishes, I couldn't shake the chill that had settled in my bones at Madison's parting words. One way or another, what exactly did she mean by that? October passed in a blur of doctor's appointments and nursery planning. We'd found out we were having a girl, and David had already painted the spare bedroom a soft lavender with white trim. I'd avoided most family gatherings, claiming morning sickness even after it had passed, just to avoid the awkwardness of Madison's absence. She'd kept her word about cutting everyone off. Her Instagram went private, she blocked all family members on Facebook, and she'd even changed her phone number. The only updates we got were through her roommate Brittany, who occasionally ran into our mother at the Whole Foods in Buckhead and would awkwardly relay that Madison was fine and focusing on herself. By November, I'd started to relax. Maybe this was for the best. Maybe Madison needed this time to grow up, to realize how ridiculous she'd been. I'd even drafted several emails to her, trying to extend an olive branch, though I never sent them. December brought my baby shower, organised by David's sister Catherine at a beautiful venue in Virginia Highland. It was everything I'd dreamed of. An elegant tea party theme with delicate finger sandwiches, scones with clotted cream, and a stunning 3-tiered cake decorated with sugar flowers. About 40 guests had gathered in the sun-drenched atrium, and I was in the middle of opening a gift from David's aunt, an heirloom christening gown that had been in their family for generations, when the French doors burst open. There stood Madison. But it wasn't just Madison. It was Madison with a very visible, very pregnant belly. She waddled in, there was no other word for it, wearing a bright pink maternity dress with "First Grandchild Loading" printed across the bump in glittering letters. Her belly looked enormous, like she was ready to give birth any minute. The room went silent except for the soft classical music playing in the background. Someone dropped a teacup, and the delicate crash seemed to echo in the space. "Surprise!" Madison announced, doing a little twirl that made several guests gasp, probably worried she'd topple over. "I'm pregnant too, almost ready to pop, actually." My mother, who'd been pouring tea, set the pot down with shaking hands. "Madison, when—" "Oh, right after that horrible meeting where you all betrayed me," Madison said breezily, helping herself to a Petit Four from the dessert table. "I realized I didn't need your support. I just needed to take matters into my own hands. I'm 32 weeks along, due in just 8 weeks. I did the math quickly in my head. I was 30 weeks pregnant, due in 10 weeks. She would indeed have her baby first if her dates were accurate." "But you weren't even dating anyone," our cousin Amanda said weakly. Madison laughed, a bright, brittle sound. "Who says you need to date someone to have a baby? It's 2024. I used a sperm donor, some lovely Danish medical student with an IQ of 145 and gorgeous blue eyes. Cost me a fortune, but so worth it." She strutted, as much as one could strut while heavily pregnant, over to where I sat surrounded by half-opened gifts. "Congratulations, by the way," she said, her voice dripping with false sweetness. "On your second grandchild. I'm sure Mum and Dad will be just as excited for number 2. Catherine, bless her, stood up and positioned herself between Madison and me. "Madison, this is a private event. You weren't invited. I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "Oh, I'm not staying," Madison said, waving her hand dismissively. "I just wanted everyone to know, and Sarah." She looked directly at me, and there was something in her eyes that made my skin crawl. "I told you mine would come first, one way or another." She grabbed a handful of macarons on her way out, pausing at the door to call back, "By the way, I'm having a boy, already named him, Jackson Richard Matthews, after Daddy. He'll be here before you know it." The door closed behind her with a gentle click that somehow seemed louder than any slam. The shower never quite recovered after that. People tried to continue celebrating, but there was a strange energy in the room. Guests left earlier than planned, hugging me extra tight and whispering things like, "Hang in there," and "Everything will be fine." But I could see the questions in their eyes. How had Madison hidden a pregnancy for 7 months? Why did she look so far along? And what did she mean by one way or another? David became obsessed with security after the shower incident. He installed cameras around our house, changed our locks to smart ones that required codes, and even looked into hiring a security service for when the baby arrived. I thought he was overreacting until my mother called me in tears one Tuesday night in January. "Sarah, honey, I need to tell you something," she sobbed into the phone. "I didn't want to worry you, but I can't keep this to myself anymore." My heart rate spiked. "Is it Madison? Is something wrong with her baby?" "I don't know if something's wrong, but something's definitely not right," Mum said. "Brittany called me. She's been doing things, dangerous things." "What kind of things?" "She's been ordering these supplements online from overseas websites. Brittany found boxes and boxes of them, things that claim to induce labor naturally, but they're not FDA approved. Some of them are from Romania, others from India. She's been taking them for weeks." I sank onto our couch, one hand protectively over my belly where my daughter was kicking. "She's trying to induce labor early, but she's only 32 weeks. That's too dangerous for the baby." "That's not all," Mum continued, her voice dropping to a whisper. Brittany said she found printouts about home births. Madison's been watching YouTube videos about unassisted delivery. She bought medical supplies online, clamps and scissors and things I don't even want to think about. Brittany thinks Madison might be planning to deliver the baby herself. That's insane, I breathed. She could die. The baby could die. I know. I've tried calling her, but she won't answer. I even went to her apartment, but she wouldn't let me in. Just yelled through the door that I'd chosen my side and had to live with the consequences. I hung up and immediately told David everything. He called our Uncle Jeffrey, the lawyer, who said there wasn't much we could do legally unless Madison actually hurt herself or the baby. Planning dangerous things wasn't a crime. We spent the next weeks in a state of constant anxiety. Every time my phone rang, I expected it to be news that Madison had done something terrible. I started having nightmares about finding her bleeding out in her apartment, about a baby born too soon struggling to breathe. The stress wasn't good for my pregnancy. My blood pressure spiked at my 34-week appointment, and my doctor put me on modified bed rest. David took time off work to stay home with me, and we spent our days trying to distract ourselves with nursery preparations and Netflix binges. Then, on a cold Tuesday morning in late January, everything went to hell. I was 36 weeks pregnant, only 4 weeks from my due date, when my phone rang at 3 a.m. It was my mother, and she was hysterical. "She did it!" Mum screamed into the phone. "Oh God, Sarah, she actually did it! There's so much blood, so much blood!" "Mom, slow down. What happened? Where are you?" "Madison's apartment." Brittany called 911. Madison tried to deliver the baby herself. She used a box cutter. A box cutter, Sarah. She tried to give herself a C-section. The room spun. I felt David's arms around me as I swayed on my feet. He took the phone from my shaking hands. "Patricia, is she alive? Is the baby alive?" he asked, his voice steady despite the horror of what we were hearing. I could hear my mother's wailing response. "They're both in the ambulance. Neither of them was conscious. Brittany found her in the bathroom. There was blood everywhere, under the door, on the walls. She said it looked like a crime scene." David kept his arm around me as he asked the necessary questions. Which hospital? What was their status? Had anyone called my father? We threw on clothes and drove to Grady Hospital, Atlanta's trauma center, in silence. I couldn't stop shaking. Despite everything Madison had done, she was still my sister. And there was an innocent baby involved who didn't ask for any of this. The emergency room was chaos. We found my parents in the waiting area, both looking like they'd aged 10 years in one night. Mum was still in her pajamas with a coat thrown over them. Dad was pacing, his face grey with shock. "Any news?" David asked. Dad shook his head. They took them both straight to surgery. Madison had lost so much blood that they said they didn't know if... He couldn't finish the sentence. We waited for 3 hours that felt like 3 years. Finally, a doctor in surgical scrubs came out, looking exhausted. Matthew's family. We all stood up. "I'm Dr. Williams. I was the lead surgeon on your daughter's case." She paused, choosing her words carefully. Madison survived the surgery, but it was touch and go. She lost a tremendous amount of blood. We had to perform a complete hysterectomy to save her life. She'll never be able to carry another child. Mom let out a sob. "And the baby?" "The baby is alive," Dr. Williams said, and we all sagged with relief. "But he's in critical condition. He appears to be approximately 31 weeks gestational age, and the traumatic delivery caused significant complications. He's on a ventilator in the NICU. The next 48 to 72 hours will be crucial." She explained that Madison had made multiple incisions with non-sterile instruments, causing massive hemorrhaging. If her roommate hadn't found her when she did, both mother and baby would have died. "Can we see them?" Dad asked. "Madison is still sedated and will be for several hours. She's in the ICU. The baby..." She hesitated. "The baby can have 2 visitors at a time in the NICU, but I need to warn you it's difficult to see. He's very small and has many tubes and wires." My parents went first while David and I sat in the waiting room. I couldn't stop thinking about how this had all started with a simple pregnancy announcement. How had it escalated to this? "This is my fault," I whispered to David. "If I hadn't gotten pregnant—" "Stop," he said firmly. "This is not your fault. Madison made these choices. Dangerous, terrible choices. You didn't force her to do anything." But the guilt sat heavy in my chest, right next to my own baby who was still safe inside me, still protected, still whole. When my parents returned, they looked shattered. Mum couldn't even speak. Dad just shook his head and said, "He's so small, so terribly small." Madison woke up 12 hours after surgery. I wasn't there for it. David had insisted I go home to rest, worried about my blood pressure. But Mum called to tell me about it. "She asked for the baby first thing," Mum said, sounding exhausted. "When we told her he was in the NICU, she tried to get out of bed, nearly tore her stitches. The nurses had to sedate her again." Over the next few days, a clearer picture emerged of what had happened. Madison had been taking a cocktail of black market supplements to induce labor for weeks. When that didn't work fast enough, she'd found a woman on Craigslist who claimed to be a midwife. The woman, who turned out to be a nursing school dropout, had initially agreed to help Madison deliver at home. But when she arrived and saw that Madison was only 31 weeks, she'd refused, saying it was too dangerous. That's when Madison had threatened to do it herself. The woman had tried to talk her down, but Madison locked herself in the bathroom with kitchen knives and box cutters. The fake midwife had called Brittany in a panic, and Brittany had called 911 while using her spare key to get into the apartment. She'd found Madison unconscious on the bathroom floor in a pool of blood, the baby partially delivered and purple from lack of oxygen. The police were involved now. The fake midwife was arrested for practicing medicine without a license. Madison would face charges too, once she was mentally competent. The psychiatrist said she was showing signs of severe postpartum psychosis, combined with whatever mental health issues had led to this crisis. The baby, Jackson, as Madison had named him, remained critical. He'd been without oxygen for an unknown amount of time during the traumatic delivery. Brain scans showed areas of concern. He might have developmental delays, the doctors said. He might have cerebral palsy. He might have any number of complications from being born so early and in such traumatic circumstances. And through it all, I was still pregnant, still carrying my healthy baby girl who kicked and rolled inside me, oblivious to the chaos her existence had inadvertently caused. 3 days before my due date, my doctor decided to admit me for monitoring. My blood pressure had been creeping up, and with all the stress, she wanted me under medical supervision. David and I checked into Northside Hospital, the same place where Madison and Jackson were still patients. It was surreal being on the maternity ward knowing that 1 floor below, my nephew was fighting for his life in the NICU. Madison had been moved to the psychiatric unit after she'd tried to leave her bed again to get to Jackson, tearing her stitches in the process. I'd just settled into my hospital bed when my nurse, a kind woman named Cheryl, came in looking concerned. "Mrs. Matthews, I need to ask you something a bit unusual," she said, closing the door behind her. "Do you have a sister named Madison?" My heart sank. "Yes, why? She's been calling up here asking about you, wanting to know your room number, when you're due, where the nursery is located. We haven't given her any information, of course, but I wanted you to be aware." David's face darkened. "She's supposed to be on psychiatric hold. How is she making phone calls?" "I'm not sure, but we're taking this seriously. I'm going to put a security alert on your chart. No information will be given out about you to anyone not on your approved list." That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time a nurse came in to check my vitals, I tensed, afraid it might be Madison somehow. David dozed fitfully in the chair beside my bed, jumping at every sound. At 2 a.m., Cheryl came in with the charge nurse and a security guard. "I don't want to alarm you," the charge nurse said, "but we've had an incident. A patient from the psychiatric unit was found on this floor. She was asking other patients if they'd seen a pregnant woman named Sarah. Security has escorted her back, but we're posting someone outside your door as a precaution." The security guard, a large man named Marcus, took up position in the hallway, but I still couldn't relax. I knew Madison. I knew how determined she could be when she set her mind on something. And right now, her mind was set on my baby. The next morning, Dr. Patterson made her rounds and checked my progress. "You're dilated to 3 centimeters, she announced. "I think we should go ahead and induce today. The baby's ready, and frankly, I think the stress of waiting is doing more harm than good." I agreed immediately. The sooner my daughter was safely in my arms, the better. They started the Pitocin drip at 8 a.m. David called our parents to let them know, but we asked them to wait to come until after the delivery. We didn't want any drama or distractions. By noon, I was in active labor. The contractions came in waves, and I focused on breathing through them while David held my hand and counted with me. Everything was progressing normally until Cheryl came in looking troubled. "There's a bit of a situation," she said quietly. "Madison has been moved back to the medical floor. Apparently, Jackson took a turn for the worse this morning. She's demanding to be taken to the NICU, but she's also been asking about you. She knows you're in labor." "How?" David demanded. "We're not sure. Maybe another patient mentioned seeing you. The psychiatric team is with her, but they wanted me to inform you in case she tries anything." The next contraction hit hard, and I couldn't focus on Madison anymore. My body was doing what it needed to do, and I had to trust that the hospital security would keep us safe. At 5:47 p.m., after 9 hours of labor, our daughter arrived. Emma Grace Matthews came into the world screaming, all 7 pounds, 3 ounces of perfect, healthy baby. The moment they placed her on my chest, everything else faded away. Madison, the drama, the fear, none of it mattered in that instant. David cried as he cut the umbilical cord. The nurses cleaned Emma while she stayed on my chest, and I memorized every detail of her face. The tiny nose, the wisps of dark hair, the way her fingers wrapped around mine. They moved us to a recovery room an hour later. Marcus, our security guard, came with us, taking up his post outside our new door. The room was at the end of the hall, away from the elevators, with only one way in or out. "Congratulations," he said as we passed. "Beautiful baby. Don't you worry about a thing. Nobody's getting past me." David and I spent the next hours in a blissful bubble. Emma nursed like a champ, and we took hundreds of photos. David texted our parents that Emma had arrived safely, but asked them to wait until morning to visit. We wanted this time just for us. Around 10 p.m., Cheryl came in for her final check before the shift change. "Everything looks great," she said, smiling at Emma sleeping in my arms. "You're doing wonderfully. I'm going to—" She was interrupted by shouting in the hallway. Marcus's voice firm and authoritative. "Mum, you cannot be here. I need you to return to your room immediately." "That's my sister." Madison's voice shrill and desperate. "I have a right to see my sister, to see the baby." "Mum, I'm calling for backup now. Do not take another step." David moved to the door, his body tense, ready to defend us if necessary. Cheryl quickly took Emma from my arms and placed her in the bassinet, positioning herself between the baby and the door. "I know she's in there," Madison screamed. Sarah, I need to see her. I need to see the baby. My baby is dying and you had yours first. This is all your fault." More voices joined the commotion. Other security guards, nurses, what sounded like a doctor trying to calm Madison down. Through it all, her voice rose higher and higher. "She stole my timeline. She stole my baby's chance. Jackson's dying because of her. Sarah." Then suddenly, silence. A few minutes later, there was a quiet knock on our door. Marcus poked his head in. "She's been sedated and taken back to the psychiatric unit," he reported. "They're putting her on a 72-hour hold. You folks okay?" We nodded, but I was shaking. David wrapped his arms around me while Cheryl brought Emma back to my chest. "We're increasing security," Marcus assured us. "She won't get near you again." But I couldn't shake Madison's words. Jackson was dying. My nephew was getting worse while my daughter thrived. The guilt was overwhelming, even though I knew logically that none of this was my fault. Cheryl seemed to read my mind. "Would you like an update on your nephew?" she asked gently. "I can call down to the NICU." I nodded, unable to speak. She made the call while David held me and Emma slept peacefully, unaware of the chaos surrounding her arrival. "He's stable," Cheryl reported after hanging up. "Critical but stable. He had a rough morning, but he's holding on. The next 24 hours are crucial." I spent that night wide awake, holding Emma and watching the door. Every footstep in the hallway made my heart race. David finally convinced the nurses to let him move his chair in front of the door as an extra barrier. And he sat there all night like a sentinel, ready to protect his girls. As the sun rose over Atlanta, painting the hospital room in soft gold light, I looked down at my perfect, healthy daughter and made a promise. No matter what happened with Madison, no matter how this all played out, I would protect Emma with everything I had. The family drama that had started with a simple pregnancy announcement had escalated to an unimaginable level. But we had survived. Emma was here, safe and sound. Now we just had to figure out how to move forward with a family that would never be the same. The day after Emma's birth, while I was still recovering and learning to breastfeed, our hospital room became command central for what was quickly becoming a legal situation. Uncle Jeffrey arrived at 8 a.m. sharp with his briefcase and a grim expression. "We need to file for an emergency protective order," he said without preamble, pulling out a stack of documents. "Madison's behavior has escalated beyond family drama. She's a genuine threat to you and Emma." David was already nodding, but I hesitated. "She's sick, Jeffrey. The doctors said it's postpartum psychosis. She needs help, not legal action." Jeffrey's expression softened. "Sarah, I understand she's your sister, but mental illness doesn't excuse dangerous behavior. We can be compassionate while still protecting Emma. The protective order will actually help Madison too. It'll force her to get treatment." He was right, of course. As if to underscore the point, Cheryl knocked and entered with another security guard. "Mrs. Matthews, I need to inform you of an incident from last night," she said carefully. After Madison was sedated and returned to the psychiatric unit, staff found several items in her hospital gown pockets, including a scalpel that had gone missing from a surgical tray earlier that day. The blood drained from my face. David's hand tightened on mine. "She also had a piece of paper with times written on it," Cheryl continued. "The times matched our shift changes and when nurses typically do their rounds. We believe she was planning something." Jeffrey was already writing. "This goes in the protective order petition. Cheryl, would you be willing to provide a written statement?" She nodded. "Of course. We take infant safety very seriously here. I should also mention that we're implementing new protocols. Emma will have 2 security bands instead of 1, and we're assigning a dedicated nurse to stay in your room at all times until discharge." The next few hours were a blur of legal documents, witness statements, and security briefings. The hospital's legal team got involved, concerned about liability. A detective from the Atlanta Police Department came to take our statements about Madison's threats over the past months. Detective Rivera, a no-nonsense woman in her 40s, took detailed notes as we recounted everything from the initial pregnancy announcement through the PowerPoint presentation to the home C-section attempt. "Has she ever been violent before?" Detective Rivera asked. "Any history of mental health issues?" I thought back through our childhood. "She's always been intense, dramatic, but never violent. There were incidents, though. She keyed our cousin's car once, cut up my prom dress out of jealousy, showed up to my wedding in a white dress." "Classic escalation pattern," the detective muttered. "Starts with property damage and boundary violations, escalates under stress. The pregnancy seems to have been a major trigger." My phone buzzed with a text from Mum. "Jackson's condition worsening. Madison inconsolable. Please don't file charges. Think of the family." I showed it to Jeffrey, who immediately screenshot it. "Document everything," he advised. "Every text, every call, every attempt at contact, even from well-meaning relatives." By noon, we had a thick folder of evidence, photos of the shattered wine glass from the announcement dinner, screenshots of Madison's social media posts over the months, growing increasingly erratic, the fake midwife's confession about Madison's threats, security footage of her trying to access the maternity ward. "This is enough for a protective order," Jeffrey said. But there's something else we need to discuss. The district attorney's office is considering criminal charges against Madison. Reckless endangerment of a child, practicing medicine without a license, criminal threatening. She could face serious jail time. But she's sick, I protested again, even as Emma stirred in my arms. She needs treatment, not prison. Which is why we need to act fast, Jeffrey explained. If we can get her into a long-term psychiatric treatment program before criminal charges are filed, we might be able to argue for treatment instead of incarceration. But that means you need to support the mental health hold and potentially testify about her behavior patterns. The weight of it all was crushing. Here I was, less than 24 hours postpartum, trying to make decisions that would affect my sister's entire future, while also protecting my newborn daughter. David, sensing my distress, took charge. "File the protective order," he told Jeffrey. "Do whatever needs to be done to keep Emma safe. We'll deal with the rest as it comes." News of the protective order spread through the family like wildfire. By that evening, my phone was buzzing non-stop with calls and texts from relatives. I'd finally turned it off and given it to David to manage. "Your Aunt Linda says you're overreacting," he reported, scrolling through messages. "Your cousin Michael thinks we should keep it in the family. Oh, and your mum's sister Sharon from Texas wants to know if this means Madison won't be at Easter dinner." Under different circumstances, I might have laughed at that last one. Instead, I focused on Emma, who was cluster feeding and keeping me grounded in what really mattered. The next morning brought a surprise visitor. Our grandmother Eleanor arrived with her walker and a determined expression, having convinced her assisted living facility to let her take a medical leave to support family. "I lived through 82 years of nonsense," she announced, settling into the visitor's chair. "But I'll be damned if I'm going to watch this family tear itself apart over Madison's delusions. Where do I sign to support this protective order?" Her support meant everything, but it also deepened the family divide. Mum arrived an hour later, looking haggard. "Jackson coded twice last night," she said without greeting. "They had to resuscitate him. Madison watched through the NICU window. She's not allowed in without supervision now. She just stood there, pressing her face against the glass, sobbing." The image broke my heart, but David stepped in before I could respond. "Patricia, we're sorry Jackson is struggling, but that doesn't change the fact that Madison is a threat to Emma. She had a scalpel, for God's sake." Mum's face crumpled. I know she's not well, but she's my baby too. I can't just abandon her." "No one's asking you to abandon her," Eleanor said firmly. "We're asking you to help her get the treatment she needs, supporting this protective order, making her face consequences. That's not abandonment. That's tough love." Mum left without saying goodbye, and I knew she was struggling to reconcile her two daughters, the one who'd given her a healthy grandchild and the one who'd nearly died trying to compete. Over the next 2 days, family members chose sides. Some, like Jeffrey and Eleanor, firmly supported our decision to pursue legal protection. Others, led by my father's sister Deborah, who'd flown in from Seattle, believed we were being cruel to someone who was clearly mentally ill. "She just wanted a baby," Deborah argued during an impromptu family meeting in the hospital cafeteria. Is that so wrong? Maybe if Sarah had been more sensitive to her feelings. "Are you seriously victim-blaming my wife for her sister's psychotic break?" David's voice was deadly quiet. "Sarah didn't force Madison to perform surgery on herself. Sarah didn't make Madison steal a scalpel or plan God knows what." The meeting devolved into shouting. Security had to be called when cousin Michael actually shoved David, accusing him of poisoning Sarah against her family. Through it all, Emma slept peacefully in my arms, unaware that her existence had sparked a family civil war. On our 4th day in the hospital, Dr. Angela Reeves from the psychiatric team asked to meet with us. She was a small woman with kind eyes and a gentle manner that probably served her well in her profession. "I've been working with Madison since her admission," she began, settling into a chair. "I wanted to update you on her condition and get some background information, if you're willing." I nodded, adjusting Emma, who was nursing. "How is she?" Medically, she's healing well from the surgery. Psychiatrically, it's complex. She's displaying symptoms of postpartum psychosis, certainly, but there are underlying issues that predate the pregnancy. Has Madison ever been evaluated for personality disorders? I thought back. No, my parents always just said she was dramatic or sensitive. They gave in to her demands to avoid confrontation. Dr. Reeves made notes. I ask because she's showing signs of both narcissistic and borderline personality disorders, complicated by the psychosis. The pregnancy seems to have triggered a complete break from reality. She genuinely believes you stole something that belonged to her. What's her prognosis? David asked. With intensive treatment, and I mean months of inpatient care followed by years of therapy, she could potentially stabilize. But she needs to acknowledge her illness first, and right now she's still convinced she's the victim in all this. Dr. Reeves paused, choosing her words carefully. There's something else. Madison has been talking about Emma. She refers to her as the replacement baby and seems to believe that if something happened to Emma, the universe would correct itself and save Jackson. My blood ran cold. David's arm tightened around me. Are you saying she wants to hurt Emma? I whispered. I'm saying her thought patterns are deeply concerning. This protective order you're seeking, it's absolutely necessary. Madison should not have any access to Emma until she's shown significant improvement. After Dr. Reeves left, I broke down completely. The hormones, the exhaustion, the fear, it all crashed over me at once. David held me while I sobbed. Emma between us, safe for now but facing a threat I'd never imagined. We're going to get through this, David murmured. We'll keep her safe, whatever it takes. Discharge day arrived with a mixture of relief and terror. The protective order had been granted. Madison couldn't come within 500 feet of us and was banned from any contact, direct or indirect. But paper didn't feel like much protection against someone who'd already shown such extreme behavior. Hospital security coordinated with Detective Rivera to plan our departure. We would leave through a service exit, take a deliberately confusing route home, and have a police cruiser stationed outside our house for the first 48 hours. It feels like witness protection, I said to Cheryl as she went through the discharge paperwork. Better safe than sorry, she replied. I've been a maternity nurse for 20 years, and I've never seen a situation quite like this. You're doing the right thing. The drive home was tense. David checked the mirrors constantly while I held Emma in her car seat, my hand resting protectively on her chest. Every red car made my heart race. Madison drove a red BMW. Our house looked different somehow, normal on the outside, but now it felt like a fortress we needed to defend. David had already installed new security cameras and a video doorbell. Our neighbour, Mrs. Chen, waved from her garden, and I wondered if she knew about the drama unfolding next door. That first night home was surreal. Every creak of the house made us jump. Emma, blissfully unaware, slept in 3-hour stretches, waking only to nurse. David and I took shifts staying awake, watching the security camera feeds on his laptop. At 3 a.m., a car drove slowly past our house, then again at 3:15. On the third pass, David called the police cruiser outside. We'll check it out, the officer assured us. 10 minutes later, he called back. Registered to a Michael Matthews, says he's your cousin? Cousin Michael, who'd shoved David at the hospital. He's not welcome here, David said firmly. We've sent him on his way with a warning, won't be bothering you again tonight. But the damage was done. If Michael was driving by, who else might? How many family members had Madison convinced to keep tabs on us? A week after bringing Emma home, Child Protective Services knocked on our door. The caseworker, Olivia Williams, was professional but thorough. We're required to investigate given the circumstances of Jackson Matthews' birth and the subsequent threats made against Emma, she explained, settling onto our couch with her clipboard. This is routine when there are safety concerns involving infants. For the next 2 hours, she questioned us about everything. Our home safety measures, Emma's paediatrician visits, our support system. She inspected Emma's nursery, checked our refrigerator, even looked through our medicine cabinet. I need to ask about your relationship with Madison, she said eventually. Has there been any contact since the protective order was issued? No direct contact, I said, but family members have been pressuring us, sending messages, driving by the house. Olivia made notes. That's concerning. The protective order extends to third-party contact. Have you reported these violations? We hadn't, too overwhelmed with new parenthood to deal with legal issues. Olivia strongly encouraged us to document everything and report it to Detective Rivera. What about Jackson? I asked, unable to help myself. How is he? Olivia's expression softened slightly. I can't share details, but I can tell you he's receiving excellent medical care. There are discussions about his placement once he's medically stable. His father's family in Oregon is being evaluated. His father? This was news to me. Madison said she used a sperm donor. That appears to have been untrue. The father has been located and is cooperating with the investigation. After Olivia left, assuring us that we had nothing to worry about regarding Emma's safety in our care, David and I sat in stunned silence. She lied about the sperm donor, I said finally. What else did she lie about? That evening, Mum called. For the first time since the hospital, I answered. The father is Madison's ex-boyfriend from college, she said without preamble. Tyler Morrison, remember him? They dated for about 6 months her sophomore year. Apparently she contacted him last summer, said she wanted a baby, and offered him $10,000 to contribute. She bought sperm from her ex-boyfriend? David sounded incredulous. He thought it was going through a clinic, had no idea she was planning what she did. He's horrified, flying in from Portland tomorrow to meet Jackson and talk to lawyers about custody. The web of Madison's deception kept expanding. Every revelation made it clearer that this wasn't just postpartum psychosis. This had been planned, orchestrated, built on lies and manipulation. How's Jackson? I asked quietly. Mum's voice broke. Better, breathing on his own for longer periods. The doctors are cautiously optimistic, but Madison... She watches him through the glass for hours. Just stands there, not moving, not blinking. It's terrifying, Sarah. 3 weeks passed in relative calm. Emma was thriving, hitting all her milestones. We'd settled into a routine of sorts, though we still checked the security cameras obsessively, and David had installed new locks on all the windows. Madison remained in psychiatric hold at Peachtree Behavioral Health, a facility specializing in postpartum mental health issues. According to Mum's updates, she was taking medication but refusing therapy, still convinced she was the victim of a conspiracy. Then came the letter. It arrived on a Tuesday, slipped under our door despite the security measures. David found it when he went to walk the dog that morning. His face went white as he read it. She's made a friend inside, he said, handing me the paper with shaking hands. Another patient who's being discharged. The letter was written in Madison's distinctive handwriting. Sarah, you think you've won, but this isn't over. Jackson is getting stronger every day, and soon he'll come home to his real family. You stole my moment, my joy, my purpose. But the universe has a way of correcting imbalances. Your daughter is beautiful. I've seen the photos Mum tries to hide from me. She looks just like you did as a baby. It must be nice to hold her, to know she's healthy and perfect, while my son fights for every breath because of what you made me do. Enjoy every moment with her. Time is so precious, isn't it? You never know how much you have. My friend Rebecca is bringing you this letter as a favor. She understands what it's like to have something stolen from you. She lost her baby too, though not the same way I lost mine. We talk a lot, Rebecca and I, about loss, about justice, about how sometimes the universe needs a little help to balance the scales. Give Emma a kiss from her Aunt Madison. Tell her I'm thinking of her, always. I called Detective Rivera immediately. Within an hour, our house was swarming with police. They dusted for fingerprints, interviewed neighbors, pulled security footage from every camera on our street. Rebecca Lawson was arrested that afternoon at a coffee shop 2 blocks from our house. She'd been sitting there for hours, watching our street, with photos of our house on her phone. We need to relocate you. Detective Rivera said seriously. This is escalating beyond what a protective order can handle. Madison's recruiting accomplices. That's a whole new level of threat. But where could we go? David's job was here. Our support system, what was left of it, was here. Emma's pediatrician was here. We'll increase patrols, the detective promised. And I'm recommending charges be filed immediately. Conspiracy to commit harm, violation of protective order, stalking by proxy. Madison needs to face consequences. That night, David and I made a decision. We would fight back. No more trying to keep the peace, no more worrying about family opinions. Our daughter's safety came first. The district attorney's office moved quickly once Rebecca Lawson started talking. Faced with her own charges, she revealed everything. How Madison had befriended her, manipulated her with stories of injustice, convinced her to deliver the letter and conduct surveillance. Madison Matthews is charged with conspiracy to commit kidnapping, violation of a protective order, stalking and harassment. The ADA, James Morrison, explained at our meeting. Based on Rebecca Lawson's testimony and the evidence collected, we believe she was planning to have Rebecca kidnap Emma. The words hit like a physical blow. Kidnapping. My sister had been planning to kidnap my daughter. Additionally, Morrison continued, she's facing charges related to Jackson's birth, reckless endangerment of a child, and practicing medicine without a license. Combined, she's looking at 15 to 20 years if convicted. But she's mentally ill, I said weakly. Which will be taken into account, Morrison assured me. But mental illness doesn't absolve criminal responsibility. We'll likely pursue a combination of incarceration and mandatory psychiatric treatment. The trial date was set for 6 months out. Madison would remain in psychiatric hold until then, with no possibility of bail given the threat she posed. The family reaction was explosive. Aunt Deborah called me a traitor to blood and said I was destroying Madison's life. Cousin Michael posted on Facebook that I was a cold-hearted witch who couldn't share the spotlight. Even some friends chose sides, with a few suggesting I was overreacting to postpartum anxiety, but others rallied around us. Jeffrey helped coordinate legal strategy. Grandmother Eleanor moved temporarily into a nearby extended-stay hotel to be closer. David's family formed a protective wall around us, screening calls and visitors. Mom was caught in the middle, visiting Madison weekly while also trying to maintain a relationship with Emma. The strain showed in her hollow eyes and trembling hands. She doesn't understand why you're doing this, Mum said during one of her visits. She keeps saying you could drop the charges if you wanted, that you're choosing to hurt her. She was planning to kidnap Emma, Mom, I said as gently as I could. What would you have me do? Mom had no answer. While the legal proceedings against Madison continued, another drama was unfolding around Jackson. Tyler Morrison, Madison's ex-boyfriend and Jackson's biological father, had arrived from Portland with his parents. The revelation of his existence had shocked everyone. Madison had been so convincing about using an anonymous sperm donor. Tyler was nothing like what I'd expected. The college boy I vaguely remembered had grown into a responsible 28-year-old software engineer, engaged to a pediatric nurse named Helen. They'd been together for 3 years and were planning their wedding when Madison's deception exploded into their lives. She contacted me last June, Tyler explained during a meeting at Jeffrey's law office. CPS had arranged for all interested parties to discuss Jackson's placement. Said she was going through a fertility clinic and they needed a known donor for legal reasons. Offered me $10,000. I thought I was helping her achieve her dream. Helen sat beside him, her hand in his, remarkably composed given the circumstances. We've talked about it extensively, she said. This isn't Jackson's fault. He's an innocent baby who needs a stable home. We want to petition for custody. The relief I felt was overwhelming. Jackson would have a chance at a normal life, away from the chaos of our family drama. But there were complications. Tyler's parents, Robert and Michelle Morrison, were also interested in raising Jackson. They were retired teachers in their early 60s, financially stable, with experience raising children. Tyler and Helen are just starting their lives together, Michelle argued gently. This is a lot to take on. We have the time and resources to give Jackson the attention he'll need, especially with his medical challenges. The custody evaluation took weeks, home visits, interviews, background checks. Through it all, Jackson grew stronger. He'd been moved from the NICU to the step-down nursery, still small but breathing on his own, taking bottles, even opening his eyes to track movement. Madison was allowed supervised visits, always with 2 guards present after she'd tried to disconnect his monitors during an early visit, claiming the machines were interfering with their bond. She would sit in a rocking chair, holding him while tears streamed down her face, whispering apologies and promises that broke everyone's hearts. "I'm sorry, baby boy," I heard her say during one visit when I'd come to drop off breast milk for the NICU donation program. "I'm sorry I couldn't wait. I'm sorry I hurt you, but Aunt Sarah made me do it. She made me desperate. Even in her grief, she couldn't take responsibility." 6 months later, on a humid July morning, Madison's trial began. The courthouse in downtown Atlanta was packed with media. The story of the sister who performed a C-section on herself had captured national attention. "Sibling rivalry gone wrong," the headline screamed. "Baby wars, a family destroyed." David and I entered through a side entrance, Emma safe at home with his parents. Seeing Madison for the first time in months was shocking. She'd lost weight, her hair hanging limp around her face. The orange jumpsuit made her look pale and small. But her eyes still held that disturbing intensity when they found mine across the courtroom. She mouthed something I couldn't understand, or didn't want to. The prosecution laid out their case methodically. The threats at the pregnancy announcement, the PowerPoint presentation, the months of planning, the illegal supplements, the Craigslist midwife, the scalpel found in her possession, Rebecca Lawson's testimony about the kidnapping plot. Madison's defense attorney, a well-known mental health advocate named Patricia Huang, didn't deny the facts. Instead, she painted a picture of a woman destroyed by mental illness, driven to desperate actions by postpartum psychosis and underlying personality disorders. Madison Matthews is not a criminal, Huang argued in her opening statement. She's a sick woman who needed help, not handcuffs. Her family failed her. The mental health system failed her. And now the criminal justice system is failing her too. When it was my turn to testify, my legs shook as I walked to the witness stand. Madison stared at me the entire time, her expression unreadable. The prosecutor walked me through the events, from the announcement to the protective order. I tried to keep my voice steady, to stick to facts, but when he showed the letter Madison had sent through Rebecca Lawson, I broke down. "She's my sister," I sobbed. "I love her. I've always loved her. But she wanted to hurt my baby. How do I reconcile that?" During cross-examination, Patricia Huang was gentle but persistent. "Isn't it true that Madison had always dreamed of being a mother first?" "Yes." "And you knew this when you announced your pregnancy?" "Yes, but did you consider her feelings at all? Did you think about how your announcement might affect someone already struggling with mental health issues?" "Objection," the prosecutor called. "The victim is not on trial here." Sustained, but the damage was done. I could see some jury members looking at me differently, wondering if I could have been more sensitive, more aware. The trial lasted 2 weeks. Witness after witness testified. The Craigslist midwife, now serving her own sentence. The psychiatric team. Rebecca Lawson, who broke down crying as she described how Madison had manipulated her grief over her own miscarriage. The hardest testimony came from Dr. Reeves, who explained Madison's mental state in clinical terms that somehow made it worse. Ms. Matthews experiences reality through a fundamentally distorted lens, she testified. In her mind, she is the perpetual victim, always wronged, always deserving of what others have. This isn't simple jealousy, it's a pathological inability to accept that other people's lives and choices are separate from her own desires. When asked about Madison's prognosis, Dr. Reeves was cautiously optimistic. With intensive long-term treatment, we're talking years of therapy, medication management, possibly permanent supervision. She could potentially achieve stability, but she must first accept that she needs help. As of now, she still believes everyone else is the problem. After 3 days of deliberation, the jury reached their verdict. Guilty on all counts, but with a recommendation for psychiatric treatment rather than standard incarceration. The judge sentenced Madison to 15 years, with the possibility of serving in a secure psychiatric facility if she complied with treatment. She would be eligible for supervised release in 7 years if she showed significant improvement. When the sentence was read, Madison finally looked at me, really looked at me. For just a moment, I saw my little sister in there, confused, scared, lost. Then her lawyer whispered something, and the moment passed. As they led her away, she was muttering about appeals and injustice. Outside the courthouse, our family gathered in 2 distinct groups. Mum, Dad, Aunt Deborah, and a few cousins stood on one side. David, his family, Grandmother Eleanor, Jeffrey and I stood on the other. The divide felt insurmountable. "I hope you're happy," Aunt Deborah spat. "You've destroyed her life." "She destroyed her own life," Eleanor said firmly. "Sarah just refused to let Madison destroy hers too." We left separately, and I wondered if our family would ever heal. A year passed. Emma grew from a tiny newborn into a curious toddler, taking her first steps on a sunny afternoon in our backyard. She had no idea her existence had once torn a family apart. Madison was serving her sentence at Central State Psychiatric Facility, a secure treatment center 2 hours from Atlanta. According to her treatment team's reports to the court, she was finally taking medication consistently and participating in therapy, though progress was slow. I hadn't seen her since the trial. The protective order was still in effect and would be until Emma turned 18. But I wrote her letters I never sent, filled with updates about our family, about Emma, about the life continuing outside her walls. Jackson had thrived in Tyler and Helen's care. They'd married in a small ceremony and were raising him alongside Helen's daughter from a previous relationship. He had some developmental delays from his traumatic birth, but early intervention therapies were helping. Tyler sent occasional updates and photos, Jackson taking his first steps, Jackson finger painting at daycare, Jackson laughing on a swing. The family remained divided. Some relatives had cut us off entirely, unable to forgive what they saw as cruelty toward Madison. Others had quietly resumed contact, sending Christmas cards and birthday gifts, trying to maintain some normalcy. Mom and Dad divorced, the stress of choosing between daughters finally breaking their 30-year marriage. Mum moved to a condo near Madison's facility, visiting weekly. Dad bought a house closer to us, becoming a devoted grandfather to Emma while respecting our boundaries about Madison. "I failed her," he told me one evening as we watched Emma play in her sandbox. "All those years, giving in to her demands, making excuses for her behavior. I thought I was keeping the peace. Instead, I was enabling her dissent." There was no comfort I could offer. We all carried guilt about Madison, what we could have done differently, warning signs we'd missed or ignored. Dr. Reeves had recommended therapy for me too, to process the trauma and guilt. Twice a month, I sat in Dr. Jennifer Martinez's office, working through complicated feelings about Madison, about motherhood, about the sister I'd lost long before that September evening. "It's okay to grieve," Dr. Martinez reminded me often. "You've lost your sister not to death, but to mental illness and the consequences of her actions. That loss is real and valid." 2 years after the trial, I received an unexpected call. Madison's treatment team wanted to arrange a therapeutic video session, not a visit, but a controlled interaction with therapists present on both ends. "She's made significant progress," Dr. Reeves explained. "She's beginning to accept responsibility for her actions. This could be healing for both of you." I agonized over the decision for weeks. David was against it, still protective of Emma and me. But something in me needed to see her, to know if any part of my sister remained. The day of the video call, I sat in Dr. Martinez's office, my hands shaking. The screen flickered to life, and there was Madison. She looked different. Older, certainly, but also calmer. The manic energy that had always surrounded her was gone. Her hair was its natural brown, no longer bleached blonde. She wore no makeup and somehow looked more like herself than she had in years. "Hi, Sarah," she said quietly. "Hi, Madison." For a moment, we just looked at each other across the digital divide. Then she spoke again. "I've been writing you letters. Dr. Patterson, she's my therapist here, said I shouldn't send them, that it would violate the protective order. But I've been writing them anyway, hundreds of them." "I've been writing you too," I admitted. "Same situation." A ghost of a smile crossed her face. We always were alike in weird ways. The conversation was stilted, carefully moderated by the therapists. Madison talked about her treatment, the medications that had quieted the chaos in her mind, the therapy sessions where she was slowly unpacking years of distorted thinking. "I remember everything," she said at one point. "That's the worst part. The medication doesn't make me forget. I remember the presentation, the surgery, planning to hurt Emma. I remember it all, and now I see it clearly. I see how sick I was." "Madison, I'm sorry," she interrupted. "I know that's not enough. It will never be enough. But I need you to know that I understand now. What I did was unforgivable. I nearly killed my baby. I traumatized you. I tore our family apart, and I'm so sorry." The tears came then, for both of us. Years of pain and fear and anger and loss flowing out through a computer screen in a therapist's office. "I don't know if I can forgive you," I said honestly. "Not yet, maybe not ever. You wanted to hurt my daughter." "I know," she whispered. "I don't expect forgiveness. I wanted you to know that the real Madison, the one on medication, the one in therapy, she loves you. She's proud of you, and she's glad Emma is safe from who I was." The session ended soon after. I left feeling drained, but somehow lighter. Madison was getting help. She was accepting responsibility. It didn't undo the damage, but it was something. Emma's 5th birthday party was a modest affair in our backyard. She'd requested a dinosaur theme, and David had gone overboard with decorations. Inflatable T-Rexes, fossil dig stations, a cake shaped like a stegosaurus. As I watched her run around with her friends, her dark hair flying behind her, I marveled at how normal her life was. She had no idea about the drama that had surrounded her birth. To her, Aunt Madison was just someone who was sick and living with doctors to get better. The family had slowly begun to heal, though scars remained. Some relationships were forever broken. Aunt Deborah still refused to speak to us, and Cousin Michael had moved to California and cut all ties. But others had rebuilt. Mum and Dad, though divorced, co-parented their role as grandparents. Jeffrey and his family were regular fixtures at our gatherings. Tyler and Helen brought Jackson to the party. The boys had become friends at preschool before we even realized the connection. Jackson was a sweet, quiet child, smaller than other 5-year-olds but bright and curious. He wore thick glasses and had some motor delays, but he was thriving. Tyler had legally adopted him, giving him the stable family Madison couldn't provide. "Aunt Sarah," Jackson called, running up to show me a dinosaur toy. That's what he called me, though we'd never officially discussed it. "Look, it's a velociraptor." "That's amazing, buddy," I said, ruffling his hair. It was strange and beautiful and heartbreaking, raising these cousins who should have just been cousins, not symbols of a family's destruction and rebuild. Madison remained at Central State, though she'd been transferred to a less restrictive unit. Her letters came monthly now, approved by the courts and full of mundane details about her days. She was taking college courses online, working in the facility library, continuing intensive therapy. She'd never hold Jackson. The adoption had terminated her parental rights, and Tyler had been clear, no contact until Jackson was old enough to make that choice himself. But she kept every photo we sent, had covered her wall with his artwork from preschool. Maybe someday, her last letter had said, when he's older, when I'm better. Maybe I can know him. Not as his mother, I lost that right. But as someone who loves him and is sorry for the pain I caused. The protective order against Emma would remain until she turned 18, but Madison had shown no signs of fixation anymore. The medications and therapy had broken that obsessive cycle, revealing the mental illness that had been building for years. As the party wound down and parents collected their sugar-high children, I found myself standing with David, watching Emma and Jackson play together in the sandbox. They were building a dinosaur habitat, Jackson carefully following Emma's enthusiastic directions. "You okay?" David asked, slipping his arm around me. "Yeah," I said and meant it. "We're all okay. It wasn't the family I'd imagined when we announced our pregnancy 6 years ago. It was fractured and reformed, held together by therapy and boundaries and careful navigation. But it was ours. Madison would probably never be part of our daily lives again. The trust was too broken, the history too painful. But she was getting help. Jackson was loved and thriving. Emma was safe and happy. Sometimes that's all the happy ending you get. Not perfection, not full reconciliation, but survival and the slow journey toward healing. As the sun set over our suburban Atlanta home, casting long shadows across the yard, I picked up dinosaur toys and paper plates, grateful for this imperfect, complicated, resilient life we'd built from the ruins of what came before. The mail carrier had left a package by the door. Inside was a hand-knitted blanket in soft yellow yarn with a note, "For Emma's birthday, made in craft therapy. All my love, Aunt Em." I held it for a long moment, then brought it inside. Maybe someday Emma would be old enough to understand and make her own choices about her aunt. For now, I folded the blanket carefully and placed it in a box in the closet, along with all the other complicated pieces of our family's story. Outside, Emma's laughter rang through the air, pure and untroubled. Whatever the future held, we'd face it together. That had to be enough.